Welcome to the Introverted Servant Leader podcast, a show dedicated to empowering purpose-driven women in corporate leadership to amplify their impact and influence. I'm your host, Sharissa Sebastian Deppen, a leadership and executive coach with over a decade of experience who guides introspective leaders in harmonizing personal aspirations with professional success. In each episode, we'll have thoughtful conversations about leadership, making decisions, embracing growth, and maintaining work-life balance while leading with quiet strength. We're so glad you could join us. Let's redefine leadership together. Hello there, and welcome to today's episode on boundaries. Now, this is a big topic for us introverts because it's so easy for us to get drained, especially since we have such a heart for serving and supporting other people. So here's what you need to know. Boundaries are actually loving and kind, not just to yourself, but to others as well. And here's why. You can say no in a way that still honors and respects the person that you're speaking with. It also may end up being beneficial in other ways, like giving you enough time to focus on the things that are most important to you, because when you say no to something, you can say yes to something else, right? But it also gives the person who might be asking something of you other options to fulfill that need. Or you could help them be more resourceful so that they know what to do the next time they have a similar request. There could actually be a number of other reasons why it is so important to have these healthy boundaries. And some of those include, not burning yourself out and not getting, so stressed out because you want to please everyone and you want to say yes, but at the same time, you're doing that at the detriment of your own priorities. So just keep all of those things in mind as we, tackle this topic of boundaries, and even as you start to consider what boundaries that maybe you do have already that are working really well, or what boundaries do you need to consider. The other thing I want to say to you, and this is kind of a bonus point here, but I want to share with you that a lot of times when it comes to relationship building, you as an introverted servant leader in particular, are so good at building and nurturing relationships that you can think about it in terms of what I call a relationship bank account. And so because you're really good at putting those deposits into that bank account, meaning that you will often, try to help out wherever you can, you care a lot for people, so, you reach out, you have those connection points, and you're really good at building those relationships. Over time, that equates to a lot of deposits in that relationship bank account. So in these times where you have to make these little withdrawals here and there, meaning, so withdrawals could be things like when you have to say no, or you have to draw a boundary, or, maybe you have to ask something of somebody and things like that that are not the easiest. Just remember that because you are so intentional about making those deposits into those bank accounts and building that relationship over time, building the trust, building the connection, all of those kinds of things, those withdrawals are not going to make a big difference in the grand scheme of things. So we tend to make a big mountain out of a molehill in our heads when we think about, I need to say no to this, or I have to set a boundary because I have other things going on and I have so little time. We tend to think that it's going to have such a negative impact on how somebody views us when it doesn't have to be that way. So with that, I'm going to go into in a minute a way in which you can say no in these situations where you do have to kind of draw a line that is going to still be honoring to the person that you're speaking with and still be respectful and still honor that relationship and actually continue to build on that relationship rather than harm it in any way. So with that, there's a couple of things that you need to kind of keep in mind, right, as you go about doing that. So recently I was speaking with one of my amazing clients and we talked about the guilt that often comes with saying no because we don't want to let people down. But here's how to say no or offer an alternative in a way that really feels good to you and where you can be at peace when you walk away from that conversation with that person. First of all, you need to make sure that you understand the request, including the impact of that request, whatever that request may be, the urgency of it, and the nature of it, right? So you want to have the full picture before you jump into solution mode and trying to figure out what you need to do. The other thing you can do is when somebody comes to you with a request, of course you're going to lean into active listening, which you're probably already good at, but you want to also recap and make sure that you really understand all the important elements of that request. And also ask clarifying questions if necessary. right? So make sure you get as much information as you can so you can have the best possible response. The second thing you want to keep in mind is framing that response. So that could be something like saying, I would love to help, but given my other priorities, I'm unable to provide you with what you need at this moment. But here's what I can do instead. So offer some kind of alternative if that's possible in the situation. So you can say, you can offer other options, maybe provide a deadline that's further out if you need to push out, that request and you need more time to be able to give them what they need. You can provide a resource or point them to maybe somebody else, right, who can help. Or let them know going forward, if you have this type of request, here's a way to, a way in which to handle it, so that they don't need to come to you, right, in the future. So have those clear next steps as well, if that's applicable. For example, let them know exactly what you would need to do to fulfill their request if it's something that you feel like you can take on, and when you can get back to them. Don't feel obligated to say yes on the spot, but give yourself time to also think about it before getting back to them if the request is not so straightforward. So another thing that I love to recommend in these kinds of situations is be transparent with them as well, right? So if somebody comes to you with a request, rather than just pushing back and saying, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that right now, let them know the why behind that if possible, or if you need more time to kind of evaluate their request and get back to them as far as, when you can actually provide what they need, then be honest with them and just say, these are the things. And if you can't share with them the steps that you would need to take in order to figure out, what it is that you need to provide and how long it's going to take, then let them know what that is, right? So for example, if you say, I need to speak with this person first, or I need to run this report, or I need to gather a little bit more information first from my team before I can get back to you, but I can get back to you by this date with the next steps, then let them know, because that also it buys you some time. And of course, this comes after really understanding the impact and the urgency from their perspective, so that you can have a better response and say, okay, I'm going to need this amount of time. These are the things I would need to do, but I will get back to you by a certain amount of time. And of course, you have to make sure that follow-up is in place. So in other words, you want to make sure that you're scheduling and you're reminding yourself, putting a reminder in, however that works for you, as far as when you want to reach back out and follow up, so that you're not kind of, leaving that person hanging. But those are all some ways that really feel good on both ends, right? It can feel really good for you to step away from the conversation knowing that you've done what you can. And it can feel really good for the person on the receiving end, because they know that you're showing them in your response that even though you're saying no and the outcome might not be exactly what they wanted, or maybe the time frame might not be exactly what they wanted, they still feel cared for, and they feel like you are still taking the time to try your best to help them, even in those times when you can't necessarily say yes all the time. And also, as always, remember, you're modeling this behavior, right? So if your team is struggling with this is something that you can share with them, and also model by your own actions of how to set these healthy boundaries. This could also be an opportunity to think about going forward. If you start to get a lot of certain types of requests and things like that, it might be time to create some kind of process or system, put that in place, so that it's almost like an automatic boundary that you and your team can set up, so that people know how to interact and engage with your team in a way that's beneficial on both sides. So I hope that helps. And with that, as we wrap up, just know I'm rooting for you and praying for you, and you've got this. If you loved this episode and want more, I invite you to find out more about my exclusive high-level 8-week mastermind for introverted servant leaders who are women in corporate leadership. You can find out more by going to leadershipmasteryalliance.com/LMA. The link will be in the show notes below. Use code PODCAST for a massive discount just for listening today. That's all for this episode of the Introverted Servant Leader podcast. I hope you found value in our discussion around leadership for introverted servant-hearted women thriving in the corporate space. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you left a review, subscribed to the show, and shared it with fellow purpose-driven leaders. Your reviews and shares help amplify the influence of introverted leaders worldwide. I look forward to connecting further on the next episode as we continue to redefine wise, compassionate leadership together. Until then, lead with grace, embrace your strength, and remember, your quiet leadership is a force that shapes the world. Take care and stay inspired.